everybody's kind of talking about this. I've been seeing in the comments, I've been seeing tweets about it, that like church was busy, like at a lot of people's like places of worship, like they saw significantly more people. And I'm going to assume, I don't know, I'm going to assume there's going to be a lot more young people there, or people, I've heard stories of people who I haven't gone to church in 20 years, in 15 years. And I decided to go to church for the first time. And I think that question got called. And I think the person who murdered Charlie Kirk was hoping for a different response to a certain extent. And I think this is the response that's the best one, which is, like maybe we need to, take this as an opportunity to lean into Christ and doing that.
No, and I think everyone's worried that the right is going to have this like Maccabean zealotry of we're not going to transform Rome by dying. We're going to transform Rome by conquest, like an expansionist conquering project, and actually enact that out. But I
link that to the people kind of canceling, the public cancellation. That is the Maccabean sense. It's like we were going to kick out the people who are obviously breaking the taboo wherever we can find them, even if it's at a local construction company or at a like Wild Wings, right? Like we're going to do that, and it doesn't seem to like the right answer. But I think that we're seeing some of that.
Well, what's really interesting is sorry to hijack it. I just got to throw this out. What's really interesting, the reason why I brought him up before was kind of return to this. Nick Fuentes, his live stream that he did in honor of Charlie Kirk, it has 2 million views on it, and it's on Rumble. Who goes to Rumble to watch anything? And he had about, I think, 175,000 people at the peak of his stream. And this is somebody who we're, to expect a level of immaturity, trolling, violence, maybe, I don't know. But he basically met the moment, and I was really shocked to basically just see him. And he was advocating for a Christian response of, we need to pray. We need to not return violence with violence. We need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And but here's the thing. I think it got a lot of people, and it kind of like how Charlie Kirk made believing in the scripture as something to center their life around was cool again. I think the reason why someone like Nick Fuentes could say that, and it hits harder than, let's say, if Paul Vanderklay said it, I think it's because this is somebody who has said, pretty rough stuff in the past, and he's actually meaning it. And I'm not saying like PVK wouldn't be meaning it, but it's like a different, it's when the moment meeting you, and you're answering it in a way that would be far more beneficial to you to rouse up anger. And it's just really fascinating that was, I think, the response that was called upon. So
if there was ever a moment for him to be who everyone thought he was or is, that was the moment. And instead he turned a different direction in that. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
right. Yeah. And it's grabbed a lot of people's attention, and I assume a lot of young men. So,
well, even in chat, Don has the comment. Really, Fuentes? That's exactly like the
So,
the question.
Hi, this is Paul. That video that I just played is from this video from Christian Baxter's channel. All the links to all the videos that I mentioned will be linked below. It's been really helpful for me to make sense of this. I made a video talking sort of about how I felt about it. I intentionally didn't put Charlie Kirk's name in the title because I didn't want the video to actually get a lot of attention, because I was processing it. And like many people my age, I didn't know a lot about Charlie Kirk. I knew that he was a Christian. I knew that he was a conservative political organizer. I knew that he did debates on campus, but that's about all I knew about him. I never watched a clip, or I never did anything like that. But one of the first things I thought of when I heard the news was what happened around George Floyd. So those of you who don't know me, I grew up in a mostly African-American church. I pastor a church that the majority of its leadership is African-American, if not also its membership, however we sort of calculate that. And I knew that when the George Floyd incident happened, that people were going to be disappointed, because I heard a lot of people saying things like, this is going to really make all the difference, and maybe now things are going to change. Some people said exactly the opposite: things will never change. And then, of course, when it's helpful to remember that was in the midst of COVID, and suddenly everyone's allowed to be outside because of this in COVID. Before it was a mortal danger, and now that, and then, there was also violence associated with some of the demonstrations. I think it's really interesting to think about the implicit religious assumptions, structures, behaviors, practices outside of church, or things that normally people tag as religious. Because after George Floyd, there was kneeling, there was basically lament, there was sort of sackcloth and ashes. There were these kinds of things, but there were public demonstrations of that. And I think that was very much along the lines of what I think was the largest, most powerful awakening, religious awakening in the American story in recent years, which was the civil rights movement. And I so often see that people, for whatever cause, usually sort of a liberationist cause, want to activate that civil rights movement power or energy or spirit or something. And people who would say that people who go to church and pray and fast, that's just a bunch of hooey. It might be psychological, but there's nothing to that. But yet, whenever some big event happens that hits a certain chord in them, they go out and they make signs. And of course, if a medieval person were to come in at this point, they'd say, well, that's a religious procession. And you can find videos of places in Latin Christendom like Mexico or Spain or Italy historically, where you had these religious processions where they would maybe carry a statue or an icon or something through the streets, and the whole town would show up, and they would dress in certain clothing, and that obviously had a religious spiritual nature. But when I saw what was happening around George Floyd, I basically assumed these people are not the same marchers that, for example, Dr. King marched with, because you couldn't just walk in and join a Dr. King protest. There was no social media that you could go on. They vetted and they trained and they prepared for the violence that would be done against them, and they did so in a way that they would not hit back. That's a deeply important aspect. Now, a lot of people, they might hear Martin Luther King Jr., they might know a few things about him, but I find very few people actually read biographies or know much about the civil rights movement. When Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, his political stock had been in decline. He was getting more and more critical of the Vietnam War, and in that sense, he was getting more and more alienated from the White House and people who had sort of been in favor of the civil rights movement earlier in the 60s. Plus, there was a lot of competition. There was a lot of competition with respect to questions of how can actual change happen. And there were many voices out there that wanted violent change. In my Sunday sermon, I opened with what I spoke about a little bit in my response video, because I'm old enough to remember I was a news junkie as a kid. And I read the New York Times. I read the Patterson paper. I watched the TV news. And people forget that the late 60s, early 70s was an astoundingly violent time, often from utopians who wanted to bring down the government. And there was an astounding number of bombings and killings that went on. So much so that it became commonplace, so that people no longer reacted as much to it. And part of what happens with the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. was that competition in terms of how change should happen. The nonviolent track really got momentum then, because people, with the shooting of Dr. King, came to a realization that political violence goes nowhere. And if you study Dr. King, you understand his roots with Gandhi, with Tolstoy. You understand a lot of what that movement put together. But it was the nonviolent aspect that was so important. And basically, so much of what followed George Floyd's death was, in some ways, sort of LARPing. People had the echoes of the civil rights movement. They wanted to sort of practice and do what they did, but they were not up to the task. And again, I remember watching this happen, and especially the defund the police movement. I rolled my eyes when I heard that, because all of my life, or most of my life, I've lived in African American communities, and I'd listened to how many matriarchs in the African American community always demanding more police presence, not less. And another aspect of this is going to be private violence versus government violence, because again, part of the liberal nation-state agreement is that the government has a monopoly on violence. And so that's one of the issues in this. This video was filled with so many good things, but I want to play just another one, and we'll see if I come back to this video. It's well worth watching the whole thing. So, again, I know how I'm going to thumbnail this, and I know how I'm going to title this, and I know that there are going to be people who watch this that don't know anything about me, or have never watched anything that I've made before. My goal in my online space has been to create not only in real life communities called estuaries, but an online community that we sort of lovingly call this little corner of the internet. And well, maybe I'll just play a little introduction to what that is.
For various reasons, the launch date for this series of discussions kept getting pushed back. Today was supposed to be the day. Then came the assassination of Charlie Kirk on the campus of Utah Valley University. A good reason to move the launch date, it seemed. These have not been easy discussions. They contain all the subjects you're supposed to avoid at church or large family gatherings. Subjects that raise hackles and ruin dinners. In the making of this series, sides were sometimes taken. Voices sometimes rose in pitch and volume. Yet every conversation you will hear on this channel ended on friendly terms. Why? The answer is simple. We are this little corner of the internet. We are something special in a world that spasms between swiping itself into a coma and burning civilization down for fear of the unknown. To that world we bring the light of reason and friendship. When we are at our best, no topics are beyond our reach. Yes, we have our reactionary moments, our fair share of hotheads and dogmatists. But they are corner citizens too. Sorry, Alan. I'm guilty as well. I sometimes pound the pulpit too hard and expect too much. We must not lose confidence in ourselves. The spirit of this place is fellowship and love, whether that's what we always feel or not. To the outside world, none of this makes any sense. From the TLC to Estuary to the flotilla of YouTube channels moving reliably adjacent to Paul Vanderklay's homeroom videos and rando conversations. It's all a muddle. The barrier to entry is very high. Too religious for some, not religious enough for others. Too Christian for some, not Christian enough for others. Complaints swirl within and without the TLC like bats. Drama is never more than a live stream away. And while we are not as diverse as I would sometimes like us to be, we are quite the mixed lot. And if the bats were to one day disappear, and a holy homogeneity imposed over this little corner of the internet, it would at once dissolve into ashes. As cliche and woke as it sounds, our strength is in our diversity. By this time next year, I suspect, we will be boasting of hundreds of local estuary meetings gathering every week in North America alone. Mutually respectful conversations across ideological lines, as John Van Dyck so eloquently puts it, is exactly the remedy for times like these, especially if we desire to avoid more bloodletting.
I made this space because I at least did some things that helped this space emerge and grow, because when I was watching what was happening around Jordan Peterson, I knew that just having an event was not going to be enough. People needed to process. I also knew downstream of Jordan Peterson 2016 to 2019 that people were going to start wanting to go to church. And I knew that that was going to be a difficult process for a lot of people, because a lot of people would go to church and the church wouldn't understand where they were coming from, and they wouldn't have any understanding of the church. They would just maybe show up at a church and not have any understanding of all of the complexities that there are out there in the church world. But I knew people needed to process. And part of what is so difficult about our time now is that so many people don't know where to go to talk.
I think just to kind of set the stage, discussion about this and sense making about this has been a bit difficult, because it's for a lot of people, it's kind of been this really potent, visceral event that has taken place, and it's no coincidence, I guess, that it's right around 9/11, and it's this national tragedy for a number of reasons, not simply over the death of one man, as tragic as it is, but just of all of the milieu we find ourselves in kind of the aftermath of the event. But it's kind of like if 9/11 happened and you couldn't talk about 9/11. It's kind of similar to when, President, Trump was the assassination attempt. You didn't know who you could talk to about it, kind of. But it was almost this feeling of
we didn't know who you could talk to, because you didn't have the sense that you had a sufficient relational platform to hazard that conversation, perhaps with someone who thought differently. And so maybe you knew it was safe to talk about it in a certain way with certain people and unsafe to talk about it in another way with other people. But you have the sense that if you actually want to process it, you actually want to process it with people who, even if they disagree with you about things, that you will possibly be able to have a productive and satisfying conversation with them. That's what we want.
We all know what's going on, but we don't know who out of the population is abhorred by this and view it as a tragedy, what percentage are indifferent to it, and what percentage of the population are celebrating it. And we've come to find out that there's a very large portion of the population that are mournful over this event, but there's also a huge element of the population that is celebrating it even. And so it's just this really strange thing to navigate when you don't really understand why it's so impactful, and then you can't even talk about it really without, stepping on a landmine, I guess.
And so, kind of here we are. And I think that's a really good way to set up the conversation tonight, that we need, even in, I guess, what you would say was what he promoted as his, view on discourse, like, if we don't know who we can even talk to about it, like, what does that do to a culture? What does that do to a people? And so before we kind of, I guess, get into more pointed topics, let's do kind of a small, a mini rando, but let's just kind of go around and introduce yourself.
Okay, and what he means there by a rando is something that followed my channel, where I began basically talking to regular people on the internet in the wake of Jordan Peterson, because they needed to talk to someone, and because I had made a video and because I was a pastor, they felt safe talking to me, and a certain percentage of them felt safe enough to have our conversation shared, and that created a community of people, a small community. And again, the size is sort of important, because if it gets too big, it's harder to manage. But a small community where there's a degree of, we know each other well enough that we can begin to trust each other with certain things and with certain kinds of conversations, and we're going to pursue it. Now, one of the things that has struck me in this, another conversation, so what happens in this little corner is that there are different channels that sort of host live streams, and people can come on and talk and say what they think. And for the most part, either we know each other because we've been doing this for a while, or we're getting to know each other because some people are new, and we're talking about it. And so one of the things that came up in this conversation, I had referenced a video in my previous talk about Jedi brain, and some people said they didn't like the way those people in that video had treated the subject, and so that then leads to more conversation, and that led to the question of the significance of this event. And nobody knows at any given time whether how a certain event will live on in the culture and in our memory. Because part of the reality is that things fade because people die. There are people that you can find when John F. Kennedy was killed, because they remember that moment. I remember very vividly when 9/11 happened. I remember when the Murrow building in Oklahoma City was bombed. I remember that because I thought, oh my, I jumped to a conclusion. I thought, the Iranians did this and we're going to go to war. And then it turned out that it was, in fact, a Michigan militia group that had done this. And so there's always a time of unknowing. And again, when George Floyd happened, a lot of people thought that was going to be a real moment. But how it's a moment and why it's a moment, Nate had said, in fact, well, we have to find out more about the shooter. And the truth is, that seldom answers and delivers to us what we want, because motivations are very tricky. And what we find is that everyone sort of takes an event like this and uses it for their own end, and that tends to make us cynical, and understandably so. But again, it's so important that we have a chance to process this, because we don't know what this is going to mean later on. But apparently, part of what this means is that people are getting more interested in going to church. There was a bump in church attendance last week at Living Stones. Now, at Living Stones, I can pretty much assume that probably most of the people who came didn't come because of this. At Living Stones, every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, we have our worship service at 11, but we have an estuary meeting. And Charlie Kirk was a big topic of conversation in the estuary meeting. And what is so wonderful about an estuary meeting, and if you want to find out more about estuary, I've got plenty of links. You can look at estuaryhub.com. That's in the comments, that's in the notes below. But what's so beautiful about an estuary meeting is people come into that conversation, especially in a place like Living Stones, which is an astoundingly diverse church, and you've got a doctor of Chinese descent who's about my age. You've got a Dutch Calvinist minister. You've got another guy who's a little bit older, and it's always just depending on who shows up for estuary that week. Another guy who's sort of a political animal, who's older, but he likes groups and he likes talking about things. And then in this particular meeting, we had a couple of African-American women in their 80s who, have very vivid memories of, much clearer than I do because they're a generation older. They're the generation of my parents. And both of them grew up in the Jim Crow South. And so we had a really remarkable conversation about this event, other events, how things happen in time. And, part of the reason why I think estuaries are so important, and I think they're so important for churches to host estuaries, even though estuaries are church adjacent. There's no assumption of religious or political belief. In fact, it works best if there's a diversity of opinion on many different matters in order to have a productive, satisfying, respectful conversations about what is most important. There's a lot of chatter, just like there was with George Floyd. I remember in Twitter with George Floyd, all these people are like, you ministers had better be talking about this next Sunday, and if you're not talking about this, blah, blah, blah. And I've heard similar things now from the other side. And this is, if you look at Rene Girard and this idea of mimetic rivalry, if you pay attention and you remember things from the past and you look at how people who are, setting their hair on fire over one thing, suddenly when sort of the political polarity is reversed, they're doing exactly what the other side complained about. And I think we have to have more integrity than that. And we have to work through these things. But another guy from the corner, I won't mention his name because not everybody wants to be quite so public, but he did a little video. This Charlie Kirk vigil happened at his alma mater, and so he just decided to go and probably just used his smartphone and interview some of the people going and why they went. So I made a little digested video of his video.
Hey, hi Corner. It's Monday, September 15th, and my university, former university, is holding a vigil for Charlie Kirk, and I think in light of the discourse around the corner, specifically with Christian Baxter, Neil's conversation, September 11th, or the 12th, I suppose, as well as some other kind of buzz around in my own circles, I kind of wanted to go check this out. I don't know if I'll actually go to the vigil, but I'm hoping to have some conversations with people, maybe meet some people protesting. Like, I want to talk to the conservatives. I want to talk to everybody pissed that this is happening. We'll see what happens. So hopefully what follows is a collection of just brief conversations with people, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, so we'll see how this goes. I'm here with Sarah. She's about to enter the vigil tonight. Sarah, what are your thoughts on the situation overall the last week?
So I think that the situation is very divided when it shouldn't be. At the end of the day, a man lost his life. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with him. That's still an assassination. And I think it's very sad seeing so many of my friends celebrate his death when death should never be celebrated.
Yeah. How did Charlie Kirk have a personal influence on you in your life in the last couple of years?
Yeah, he definitely helped me feel more comfortable speaking about my faith and my beliefs. I went to his event when he was on campus here, and it definitely caused a lot of divide with some of my friends because I went to the event, and I ended up having a lot of debates. But he just helped me feel more, I guess, safe expressing my opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any other thoughts you want to share? Any other final words?
I feel just so much sympathy for his family and his kids, but I know that those kids are going to grow up knowing their dad did a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You did so good. Hey, I'm here with Lydia outside the Marshall Student Center. Lydia, what brings you here? What are your thoughts on this situation?
I think it's really unfortunate what happened. I think nobody really thought of him as a person. I think it's super sad. He had a wife. He had 2 kids. I mean, he had a 1-year-old. It sucks for her having to go home and just let her know, like, she doesn't know what to say to her kid. Yeah. She said he's with your dad with Jesus. I mean, it sucks. Like, I feel bad for him, praying for her. He was, I don't know, he was really good for the community. All he did was give people a voice, and I think it sucks that they took that away from him.
Sure. Thank you, Lydia.
My name's Adam. I'm here protesting the Charlie Kirk Memorial because I don't understand why people are showing this level of humanity for someone who is a racist bigot when people around the world are dying. 100 people in Gaza die every single day via our tax dollars. I don't see anyone talking about that. It's disappointing. I'm disappointed in pretty much everyone here. It's just sad to see, and I'm using my free speech, so I'm just out here protesting.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts you want to share, man?
No. Free Palestine. Love everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, dude.
Yeah, that guy's a joke. There's no genocide in Gaza. He should go home. Okay. None of that here.
Yeah.
I think that this murder is horrible. It's absolutely unprecedented. I mean, not unprecedented, but it has happened. Like last time the murder like that happened was MLK Jr. I think what Charlie did was very impactful. We currently see lots of people creating new chapters for Turning Point. We see lots of conservatives getting out of shadows and speaking up. They wanted to silence us, but it actually emboldened us. They did not kill just one of us. They attacked every single one of us. It's like, yes, everybody is thinking that, okay, if they killed him, they would just like that kill our father, our brother, our grandfather, who has the same views. And he wasn't a radical. There was nothing controversial about it. And that's what's scary about it. Initially, when I heard the news, I was filled with rage. Maybe even an unrighteous rage. And I repented. I prayed for the Lord to guide my anger against things that are abominations to Him, and not just to people that did nothing. I was even angry to people that had nothing to do with it, just regular left wing. But then I realized that we should keep peace at all costs. Because if we start retaliating, if we start doing the same thing as they do, killing our political opponents, this country will descend into war. And it's not going to be pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I myself am from Ukraine. I'm no stranger to consequences of war.
When did you come over here?
3 years ago.
3 years ago? Man.
Yeah, after the start of the war.
Okay. Renan, you got any other thoughts?
Excuse me?
Got any other thoughts?
I think that's it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, man.
So I've always been someone who's kind of quiet about my beliefs and everything, and just kind of keep the peace type of person. But I feel like after this, it's like his death rattled me so hard, and I wasn't expecting it. And I now realizing after talking to multiple people, it's because he was a brother in faith in Christ, and it was like I lost one of my brothers. And I've decided, like, after this, it's just like I've been moved to, I'm no longer being quiet. I'm speaking out what I believe. If I hear something, I'm saying something type of thing, you know? And yeah, I'm just excited to like see what I can do and like what change I can bring. Even just my tiny little voice, like, but you see, like, all these tiny little voices come together, they create something, and it matters, you know? And all of our voices matter. And I feel like everybody should just do a little something to stand up in what you believe in and no longer stay silent, because every little tiny voice matters because they come together and they make one big voice, you know? And I feel like it's really important for everybody to do the same, you know? Stand up, say something. Even just this, going to somewhere and meeting other people and voicing it to other people. I feel like it's something really important. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think it's really terrible what the events were and how everything went down. Charlie was such an inspiration to so many young people, myself included, and in light of recent events, it's definitely inspired me more. I'm sad that everything happened the way that it did, but it's definitely inspired me to take some sort of action and to start standing up for more of my rights. But what about you?
I think that no matter what you believe, it was still somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's dad. And now there's kids who don't have a father, there's somebody who's a widow, and there's parents that don't have a child anymore. So no matter what you think, it was still terrible.
Yeah, it's still terrible.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. All right, Christian, why are you here?
I'm here to support Charlie and his mission with Turning Point and getting out there and getting conservatives to vote and to keep pushing. And so after Charlie Kirk lost his life, I wanted to be here to show support for that cause, because just because he's gone doesn't mean that his cause is gone. We're going to keep on fighting.
When this happened, I was really surprised that my friend Glenn Scrivener from the UK picked up on it so quickly, and it impacted him so much. One of the things that so McMo jumped into this stream.
Yeah, I came on mostly just to say that PVK and Nate are wrong. I think that this will be much more significant than they seem to think it is in this moment. If not, I mean, historical, who knows? But no, this is a very significant moment, and the significance of it didn't hit me right away, nor was I kind of immediately saddened, like it seems like some people are, even angered. Like I didn't really have much of an emotional response to it. Part of that was because I was on a work trip. Now, the next morning, so this would have been Thursday morning, I got a call from HR and my role got reorganized out. So now I'm unemployed. And so I've basically been viewing this whole thing through the lens of like upside down world, where like I have a new house, a new car, no job, et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, I feel like I have been pretty tapped in to at least the corners of the corner that I am tapped in. And yes, I think that this is very significant. And it's significant because Charlie Kirk is considered a kind of normie conservative in some real sense. And so if the normie conservative is being made into the likes of Martin Luther King or JFK, then what could be said about someone who has more conservative views than Charlie, or more religious views than Charlie, less kind of secular liberal views?
But the problem, and it's interesting that he framed it that way, because of course John F. Kennedy was a fairly popular president. And again, because he died young, became iconic. Martin Luther King Jr., as I mentioned, his stock had sort of been falling, but because he was killed, he became iconic, and they become iconic for what they're remembered by, which is always selective, because John F. Kennedy was a sex addict. That's basically. He was on drugs for a lot of the time he was in office. And that doesn't mean he was a bad president, but his life was complicated. And part of what happens with a death, especially to a younger person, I mentioned in my estuary group that Marilyn Monroe has a different resonance in our culture than Elizabeth Taylor. Both Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor were young beauties that had, careers in Hollywood, but we watched Elizabeth Taylor grow old. We didn't watch Marilyn Monroe grow old, and so Marilyn Monroe then sort of becomes an icon of something. And so there's very much an iconification that is happening right now in the culture. And so I was quite surprised. Now the mustache will go away, mercifully, by the next video. But I was very surprised how this struck Glenn and how this has resonance in the UK. It's very interesting because, well, the American UK dynamics are themselves quite interesting. And so he made this video, where he argues, and he'll have to make the point in the next video that, well, part of the reason these things have so much resonance is because our civilization is founded on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Now, of course, when George Floyd happened, certain groups of people saw it in that resonance and other people howled. And, basically the reverse is happening now. And that's why when I saw the news of Charlie Kirk, I immediately thought of George Floyd and what was happening there. So then yesterday he made a new video. You can see that the mustache is gone. Then again, I'm not one to talk about facial hair.
Source of the statistics that say that 8 million Americans would come back to church this Sunday if they were but asked. He said this on Twitter: "Since modern polling began in the 1950s, there has not been a single event that has led to a significant durable increase in church attendance rates. Every example, like 9/11, may have led to a short-term increase, but all that faded back to baseline within a few months." So if we are...
And that's where you have to have a little bit of sobriety. When there's a dramatic event, there's a tragedy, everybody rallies, but...
Relying on the event of Charlie Kirk's death to get people back to church, we might be relying on the wrong thing. Invitation through friends and loved ones, that would lead to a much more durable bounce back to church attendance.
But it's also a question of what are they going to find? And Glenn... Glenn knows this, but it was the same challenge with the Jordan Peterson moment that, well, churches have to figure out what to do. But I think critical in all of this is people learning again how to speak with one another, how to talk about things, to have, and if you're the only way you're going to have the courage to say something meaningful, something honest, something truthful, is in a particular setting if you have the context in which, well, people are going to disagree, some people are going to get upset. It was the guy on Twitter who said comments about the video that he didn't like, and those guys were Nate's friends, and Nate came in hot. The thing is, once you get to know people, you get to know that such and such a person tends to come in hot when they get upset. And that's okay. That's just how they are. They come in hot when they're upset. And you can let them get hot. It's their emotions, not yours. Try not to get triggered. Kind of try to hold on to yourself a little bit and not necessarily get pulled into the dynamic, and then have a conversation and see where it goes.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. A ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest, treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river, dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us, baptized in ball pits, a clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. say please, say cheese. Between Kirk Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Well, I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, our propositions participate procedurally, running in circles. Remember in body, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, them damn egregores are whispering sweetly. We're all NPCs in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, bread pill, Mars Hill, or DMT, or whatever you feel. Got one and number two, it's all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on Zoom, ontology for dummies, a bird's eye view. 'Cause if you really knew, could you really even say? Totally depraved, all totally saved, a total disposition from the bed we all made. Or is it the elect, or are we just insane? From John Vervaeke to Jonathan Pajot and Jordan Peterson to the Chris Pacou Show, Paul Vanderklays and Griswold Grimm and all the dice he shakes. This estuary ditty is a little bit cringy, ain't quite the U-shaped or the hero's journey. All the NPCs in the flood treading water to watch you save the day with a bunch of chitter-chatter. From the ortho bros to the Catholic Joes, or atheistic Joes, to Protestant folks, the Joe Schmoes, and Jewish Jacobs, and everything in between. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own.